When I lived in the Caucasus as a child, I became close friends with local boys who loved to play and fool around like me. We used to shoot guns at targets, chase cows, look for local jackals, and intimidate them. Our favorite pastime was sitting around the campfire, which we often arranged when we were on the outskirts of the village. And of course, we liked to tell each other scary stories. Some of our stories were not very scary, but some inspired indescribable horror. One of my friends, whose name was Said, told us a story about Shaitan. The story told of a terrible demon in the form of an ugly, 2-meter-tall woman with bloody eyes and a huge mouth. This Shaitan lived in a deep burrow between two small hills not far from the village. The burrow was covered by a heap of dry, broken branches. Said said that his elder brother, Ali, had been there with his friends. They wanted to see if the Shaitan lived there for real. The boys told me nothing grew there, no trees, bushes or grass. The place was damp and the streams of sun would hardly reach it. No one could understand why the ground was wet and muddy, for the last rain had been a week ago. It was as if the ground in this place had never dried up, for the mud was sticky and thick. However, this wasn't the only thing that confused them. The burrow, the story went, was quite ordinary. It might have been dug by a badger or a wolf, but there were no badgers or wolves in the area. The branches that covered the burrow were always dry, meaning the burrow wasn't abandoned. It was all very creepy, because who would want a burrow? They approached the dark burrow slowly, step by step. When the comrades were already a few meters away from the burrow, they listened. For the first few minutes, it was fairly quiet, but suddenly, the familiar silence was drowned out by a strange, muffled shuffling from the burrow. Slowly, but inevitably, the sound intensified. Something was coming towards them. Everyone was confused, and no one had realized what was happening. A daze seized them as they heard the sound of twigs being pulled apart. The twigs were slowly crunching, and the creature was in no hurry to come out, which only increased the adrenaline in their blood. Everyone stared in silence at where something evil was about to emerge. The Shaitan began to emerge slowly after breaking the last of the twigs. His appearance made the boys shudder with despair and horror. A huge hump slowly emerged from the burrow with massive, inhumanly long arms and short legs that inspired indescribable horror and animal fear. The creature's head was simply horrific, blood-red eyes without whites, long neck, elongated chin, but most horrible of all was the elongated toothless mouth. The creature didn't move. It was aware of the general fear and enjoyed it. Not a second later, one of the boys, despite his fear, rushed back to the village. Everyone followed his example and screamed as they ran away, slapping their shoes in the mud. My brother realized later than the others that it was time to run, and unfortunately caught the creature's gaze. The creature's mouth spread into a wide grin that went beyond the supposed boundaries of the mouth. For the first second, the Shaitan didn't move, but then slowly, very slowly, it approached Ali. Only when it was called out did the guy come to his senses. Even though Ali ran later than the others, he quickly caught up with his friends, who came short of him in the running. But one of the friends slipped on a stone and fell to the ground. Those who were near helped the poor man to get up but realized that he wouldn't be able to run. Amir, the largest of the friends, slung the injured man over his shoulder and decided to continue walking, as they all thought that the danger had passed. But they were wrong. Not far away, they saw it. The creature was 100 meters away from them, in an open field, and was approaching them with a quick step. Scared to death, the friends ran at the top of their speed. Soon, Ali and his friends reached their home village. The boys decided to tell the story only to close people and relatives, but in a day, the whole village knew about it, but no one spread the story widely. Besides, many adults said that there were militants in those places who wanted to make future mercenaries out of children. This strongly influenced us, and we didn't dare to go there. After telling the story to the end, Said looked at all the listeners and expected a well-deserved appreciation for the real story. "Do you mean we should believe that the Shaitan is hiding in a barrel?" grinned one of the comrades, Ahmed. "Yeah, it's a real truth. If you want me to prove it, then let's go. I'll see your face when you see it," said Said, furious at the disbelief. "Now, we are forbidden to go there. My uncle told me that there are militants in these mountains," said Shamil. "I thought that all these guys who had been there were just telling a fairy tale to keep us all away from the militants, and the adults were not lying and were telling us the real truth. I'm not so crazy to go where militants are operating. Thank you, but some other time," finished the dialogue Shamil. For a long time there was silence. Everyone looked at the blazing fire and thought about everything they had heard earlier. Soon the dialogue started again about the same story. In the end, Said argued with Ahmed about the story's truth, and they decided to go to the barrow together at dusk. We tried to calm them down, and they decided to finish the stories for the day and go home. Returning home with Shamil, I was sure everything would be alright, and no one would go to the dreadful barrow. Already at home, I decided that I would see that the deal didn't take place. Taking my grandfather's binoculars, which I always kept in my bag, I began to watch. The room's window faced the bend that led to the two hills, and Ahmed's house was visible from there. I could barely make out anything in the darkness, but the lanterns shining in the courtyards of the homes provided a little light. I hoped that none of them would come out, but suddenly I saw Said's silhouette emerge on the path leading to the two hills. I was perplexed, but soon Ahmed came out, and then he and Said walked slowly towards the hills. I stood up abruptly and was stunned. Tearing away from the binoculars, I woke up the whole sleeping family. The neighbors heard me and soon came running towards the house. Having quickly discussed the situation, the adults immediately began preparing to go out. Some had daggers and some had shotguns. I wanted to be one of the first to go, but I was refused completely and demanded to go to bed. But I couldn't just sit at home. Jumping down from the balcony, I quickly walked up the hills that crossed the villager's path and hid in the bushes. As I followed the light that illuminated the path of the crowd of villagers, I caught a glimpse of a movement nearby, and by the distinctive and familiar walk, I realized that it was my friend Shamil. Coming a little closer to him, I called out to him so that he could hear the familiar timbre of my voice. Shh! Soon, Shamil ran up to me and hid the knife he had brought in his pocket. There are indeed militants in these areas, who luckily somehow still haven't started frantically shooting these two morons to death. A scarecrow is there to keep people out, not to attract them in. So we should get these idiots out of there as soon as possible. I'm sure that they will hide from the adults, so that the main task lies with us," said Shamil. "We, like everyone else, could be under attack at any second," I replied. We must save their lives at once, whatever the cost. You know we can go round the left side of the hill to get to the barrel. Our way is safer, and we'll try to be as invisible as possible." "Of course," I answered. Suddenly, I heard a stirring, which made me shudder and turn back. The sound wasn't far away. Someone was following us. Shamil also turned his head and grabbed a knife from his pocket. I began to back away slowly. The footsteps were getting closer. It seemed there was no way out. Shamil began to walk slowly towards me, not taking his eyes off the thick grass. We looked ahead and waited. I frantically tried to find a stone when the sounds finally sounded close enough, but before I could do anything, I turned my head forward again and saw, to my shock, Said and Ahmed. Shamil and I were halted, not realizing the nonsense of the situation. The first to break the silence was Said. "Don't worry, we've already been in that barrel. Haven't seen anyone, haven't heard anything. My idiot brother told it for nothing." "You are an idiot for believing this fairy tale. They can fire on us at any moment," said Shamil, blushing angrily. "There is no one in the ravine or on the hills," Said replied. I looked up and it was true. The crowd of villagers had gone somewhere. But stop. Here are silhouettes. A few people on one side and the other. And here, too. They switch off the lanterns so as not to start a mass shooting. That complicates matters. "You idiots! It's urgent to call adults!" Shamil shouted, sharply moving forward. Ahmed and I followed him, unable to see the road ahead. After a short distance, I could feel my soul sticking to the mat and felt the ground's dampness. We were crossing the same place with the same barrow. Involuntarily glancing into the barrow, I was horrified. There stood someone's silhouette about 30 meters away from us. It was impossible to determine who it was, but it hardly looked human. I picked up my pace to get away from unfortunate barrow. We approached the silhouettes and realized that they were our villagers. We were overjoyed. The relatives immediately scolded us, especially Said. Despite the slaps, we were happy that everything was so cheap. Who knew that all this could be interrupted in an instant? One of the villagers shrieked and pointed into the darkness, where a silhouette could hardly be recognized. It was the same silhouette. Everyone began to wonder who was before them. It was clear that no one believed in the fairy tale, and in vain. The silhouette began approaching, and someone dared to shine a light on it from afar. Even though the creature was far away, it was enough to realize it wasn't human. It had a huge hump, an elongated mouth open to an unbelievable size, and eyes that glitters brightly in the light and inspired terror. My body was covered with goosebumps. My throat went dry, and my whole body trembled. The others also began to shine their lights there and silently stare at the silhouette approaching us. Less than 20 meters remained, and nothing could break the silence. Suddenly, shots rang out in the air, bullets whistled past, and someone was shouting furiously. It became clear that they were militants. Despite our frantic fear, we scattered, ignoring the creature, which began to dash about, shouting and laughing furiously, which made my hair stand on end, and I sped up even more. Footsteps could be heard behind me. I couldn't make out silhouettes, and I couldn't get my bearings. Behind me, I could hear movement. Someone was shouting something again, and I could hear the sound of bullets. I was approaching the village, staring ahead. I only wanted to hide in the house under the bed and not leave until morning. No one in the village was asleep. Everyone was out on the street watching us. I quickly ran past and heard myself being called. I heard a familiar aunt's voice. Quickly running into the house, I locked myself in my room. My head was boiling. I rushed from one corner to the other. I felt sick. My eyes went black and I fell. I woke up in a hospital room. Said and one of my relatives was lying next to me. As it turned out, about 12 people were injured by gunshots that night. I, Ahmed Shamid, and a couple of other villagers were luckier. I don't know what that thing was doing at that moment, but luckily, among all those people who were looking for us, they didn't find a single corpse, although there were a lot of bloodstains on the hills. Too much even for the wounded. I didn't bother to go into details. I just wanted to forget about it. We didn't discuss this topic for a long time, but sometimes, when I still came to the village at a young age, we, Said, Ahmed, Shamid, bitterly remembered that moment and never came near that barrow again. Having left the Caucasus, my memories are still fresh. I remember all this action very well as that bloody night. I still keep in touch with those at the barrow that night. I recently learned that the ravine is overgrown with plants and grass, and the damp earth is gone. The barrows is also empty. It's all piled up inside. This can only perhaps suggest that the creature is gone for good, although I'm more sure that it's just changed its place to a new barrow.